Welcome to Animal Resistance University. Enjoy the Police Liaison training by Cheyenne Demeanor.
Police Liaison is not like something that you can go and read a book about. It's not something that there are many workshops really on. It's mostly just based off of experience and trial and error and things like that. And so there's still so much to learn, and some of what I say may not specifically apply to you in your country. It just depends. So always, check in with a lawyer and your local activist community, even outside of the animal rights community, because there are activist groups who have been working like continuously for far longer than our groups have been. So they have a lot of knowledge that they can share and wisdom. So let me go ahead and get this screen sharing if it works. Let's see. All right. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
Perfect. Let's see. Quickly just try and fix this. My side of the screen is not working so well. Okay, I'm just going to pull it up on my phone instead to have my speaker notes. But so yeah, so a little bit of a disclaimer for like norms or such on the Zoom call. So if you can just keep yourself muted unless you are sharing a question or specific response, and questions will be asked if anybody has any periodically. And so I'll just put this up there. But yeah, otherwise, if you can just keep that muted, otherwise there's quite a bit of background noise and stuff. Police Liaison. Sorry, I just have to find my notes on my phone. Okay, let's see. All right, so Police Liaison, and let's go to the next slide. So I want to make a few acknowledgements to start. So some of the people who have been very influential in teaching me kind of what I know about Police Liaison work, and also who have helped me to develop this training. So one of those people is Cristobal Van Breen from Berkeley, and also XR has been influential, very much so recently. So just to share quickly their names and acknowledgements, and another disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. That's a really important one, because like I said before, it's going to vary from place to place on some of these items of whether or not this is applicable to where you are. And also, I don't want to come across as if this is legal advice. I can't give legal advice, as I'm not trained in doing so. So just a quick disclaimer there. Let's see. Sorry, this is not really working well for some reason. Okay, I need to figure this out really quick. Okay. So sorry, everyone. It was working earlier, and for some reason it's not now. I wonder if I can make this smaller. Oh, wait, actually, maybe if I go like this. Can you tell me now if you can see only the slideshow?
You look at my screen, you can exactly see what I see.
Oh, I can't see the screen. Hold on. Go ahead again.
So you can still see like the top block, like the top.
Okay, just that, but not like the speaker notes on the side.
No.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. We're back in business, folks. All right, so another disclaimer is that for this role that there is a potentially higher risk of getting arrested. And so noting that before putting yourself in this position is super important so that you don't go in with expectations of absolutely not getting arrested, get arrested, and then that has negative consequences for you in your life. So, you know, it definitely has a lower risk, I would say, than, you know, actually actively doing one of the roles of like civil disobedience, like locking on and things like that. But because you are coming in contact with the police, and I'll explain more later a few reasons why, it does put you in jeopardy. So another thing, like, and I'll say this now to make that this strong point, but I'll reiterate it again later. And that's that, like, make sure that you mitigate that you're just passing info on, and that you're just speaking to the group and bringing their decisions back to the police, that you are not the person in charge. Another disclaimer is that, you know, people are treated differently depending on their ethnicity, their gender, their class, all of these different things, even the officer's mood. And it is very important to acknowledge that, you know, like for myself, I am a person of privilege as I am white appearing, and to not like make it seem like it's not a big deal just because that's not my experience as a white appearing person. So for some people it is more risky based on, you know, their ethnicity, based on their gender and things like that. So just keep that in mind, and especially so that police unfortunately are victims of this system too, and in such a way that they are more so, at least it has been historically speaking, more likely to play off of these perceived differences, we'll say. Okay, so what is a police liaison? Does anybody want to chime in here and share what they think a police liaison is?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a person that's like a chain between the motives. Well, not really the motives, but like the outcome that the group wants to expect. And it's like a barrier between the group and the police. You try to be like the best barrier you can be.
Yeah, so essentially a police liaison during the demonstrations are the only point of contact between the police and the demonstrators. And basically they're just an advocate for what the group's needs are. They serve as a go-between, and they facilitate clear communication of like demands, expectations, needs, and responses back and forth. They also minimize reckless behavior of police, and they de-escalate most of the time. We'll touch on that a bit later. And so also they'll strategically escalate when necessary. And very important that they are not the organizer. And like oftentimes I will see that the organizer steps in as the police liaison, and this significantly increases the risk of that organizer being found out, of them being arrested, as well as putting the whole action in jeopardy of not being successful in the way that the organizers intended it for it to be. So
basically it's like a negotiator.
it's not, and I'll touch on that a bit more later about why. So anybody want to share potential benefits of having a police liaison at your demonstration?
it lowers the risk of being arrested if people are all time different people coming out, and there are different people talking to police. You have a higher risk of those people getting arrested instead of just one, and also to exclude any type of how do we say it in English, miscommunication. So it's you have one point of contact, and there isn't as much chance on being misinterpreted and stuff like that. So the word I try to find doesn't want to be found.
No, that was great. That was really great, and that's definitely it right there. Does anybody want to add any other potential benefits?
Confusion.
Yeah.
That was a word. Sorry.
Oh.
Anybody who wants to just chime in?
I think it's to make the protesters focus on protesting as effectively as possible, and so they don't get disturbed by the police coming and ask them stupid questions.
Yeah, that's definitely true too. I actually have a request. If Doug feels comfortable actually hand stacking and helping me with that. If you can hear me, Doug.
Can't, because I'm doing this on my mobile.
Okay.
But I can try and find a laptop and do it in a bit. But at the moment,
Okay.
I'm on my mobile, so I can't see all the screens.
Okay, no worries. Glenn, can you hand stack? Essentially just like when I'm asking for like participation in the group, if you can just see like who's raising their finger and just like call upon them. And ideally it's hard online, but to like have them in order.
Yeah, one of these things we did in another call I was in a couple days ago is if you want to say something, write an X in the chat, and then it's really easy to see who's first and who's following. Because it's like in the chat, you can easily see
Perfect.
it. So
Yeah,
if you want to say something,
right.
write an X in the chat.
Sweet, because I have like so many things on my screen that I'm not able to see like who is requesting to speak. Okay, so let's get on with this. So yeah,
I just want to say Els wrote something in the chat to add to this topic.
Yeah, go
she
for
wrote,
it.
"You don't have to worry about what to say or making mistakes, as the police liaison knows it all or should be trained."
Yeah, definitely. All of these are really good reasons. And so like to highlight what was said already of like clear communication both ways. So from folks taking nonviolent action to the police and vice versa, it's very clear. And it's like, if you don't have a police liaison and everyone is just kind of randomly talking to the police are not only getting probably more information than they should be getting, but possibly wrong information, incorrect information, or information that could potentially incriminate people. It could also be information that could incriminate people for something that they didn't do. So it's very, very important that it's clear and it's as correct as it can be. So that's why it's going through the police liaison. Also, police are more likely to behave well when they know that they're being filmed and that people know their rights. And so this also goes in line with having a police liaison, someone that they know has been trained, someone that knows their rights, that is going to be, taking every conversation seriously rather than just like lightly as if it was, small talk or something like that. And again, most of the time, police liaisons are de-escalating the situation, trying not to get arrested or injured, and trying to minimize the risk of the participants from also getting arrested or injured. But sometimes strategically, we may want folks to get arrested. And sometimes police don't want to arrest anyone, so this can be kind of tricky. This is something that we saw recently at the Arla demonstration in London. It was really, really difficult to get the police to finally arrest people. They had to make calls, and when they had to wait ages. They honestly really just wanted to wait until we got bored and left. So a demonstration that may only be initially 4 to 5 hours may end up being 10 hours because of that, and that's what we saw there. And also many people feel more comfortable, especially at their first protest, if there's a police liaison, if they know that they are not going to be expected to have a conversation with the police and they've never been trained before. So, and also it provides a barrier of protection even to those who are at higher risk, depending upon like their gender, their race, and things like that. So police liaisons play a really critical role. They provide a barrier between the activists and the police. And that especially is true in terms of the risk of violence. So if that police liaison can de-escalate the situation and have a conversation to be able to hear the demands or hear the requests of the police, that is much more likely to de-escalate the situation and minimize the risk of police just going ahead and being violent towards the activists. They can also help advance the goals of the activist group, such as I was saying before, if the activist group is intending to have arrests happen, they can help facilitate to make that happen. This is a really important role that's not to be taken lightly. It's also it can be a very scary role, but if you prepare yourself well and do your homework, you should feel confident and at ease when talking to the police, mostly. So first things first, know your rights. Please, I beg everyone to, if you don't know your rights, you really, really should. This doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what country you're in. You really should know your rights. So having your local organizers, or just taking it upon yourself to organize this with a lawyer, an attorney, or a local law group that does this like pro bono. Several, at least in the United States, already do this kind of thing for people who are doing like any other kind of activist work, such as for the gay rights movement or for Black Lives Matter and things like that. So they're already very familiar with this kind of law and can tell you what your rights are when protesting. So whether that is like your right to protest, freedom of speech kind of thing, or like, you know, what your rights are in terms of where you can demonstrate and what police are allowed to say to you, what they're not allowed to say to you, which is they can pretty much say whatever they want. But if you're able to know what your rights are, you can document everything that is told to you, that is said, that you know you don't have the right to do this, but you know you do have the right to do that. You can assert your right, or you can say, well, that's not our position today and we'll just take a step back, but then write that down and have that documented, that this is what was said to you by the police. Specific things to know when you are working as a police liaison: what will get me arrested in that specific city and states and country, what police are not allowed to do. So for example, allowed is kind of a rough term because, like I said, they're kind of allowed to do whatever they want. But at least in like the UK, for example, they're more likely to give you a warning a few times before arresting you. They can just arrest you right off the bat, but it's not likely that they'll do that. They'll give you a few warnings beforehand. Also, what they are allowed to do, what rights I can use to my advantage. So like I said, the right to protest, specific laws that make certain forms of protest legal or illegal in certain areas, and what to do if you are arrested. So for example, a group in the United States, the American Civil Liberties Union, is a contact that you can actually organize a training with, and they have lawyers that can come and give a group training to your local community, which is really cool. Also, another reason to know your rights is, like I said, to be able to come across that you are well informed and that you're not going to let the police trick you. Proper expectations. So it was noted earlier, like, oh, I guess that's like, you know, the police liaison negotiates. But no, the police liaison does not negotiate. So don't let the police think that you can negotiate unless you've been empowered to do so by the activists. And honestly, having negotiations go through the activists is one of the ways that I recommend being able to stall for more time. And I'll talk about stalling tactics later. But this will, like, if you are a negotiator, that's going to increase your risk again of getting arrested. So it'll put you in more of an organizer role. So I don't recommend that. Having a specific person who, whether that's one of the organizers or a specific person who's been trained and briefed on being the negotiator, who the police liaison will then go back and forth talking to, is preferable. Also, a police liaison does not make any decisions. They are not in charge. They are simply there to receive information from the police and relay it back to the activists and vice versa. And this is another reason to have the police liaison separate from other organizer roles, or rather not other organizer roles, just organizer roles. Yeah, just because you say you're not in charge also doesn't mean that you won't be targeted as such. There's this term of deputizing that police will end up doing. They can't just say, you're in charge, and then that's kind of like just their perspective at that point, and you can't really change it. But trying your hardest to say, no, I'm not in charge. I'm simply here to facilitate communication. I don't make decisions and such is really important. As a police liaison, your first job is to keep your team safe from legal repression and arrests. And this is a huge responsibility. If you do or say the wrong thing, not to like put so much pressure on everyone, but if you do or say the wrong thing, it could lead to arrests or fines for you and your team members. And your team will be relying on you to do your job well. So it's really important that you pay attention during this and further trainings. Your second job as a police liaison is to assert your rights. And sometimes, again, being the liaison means accepting more risk. This is a really big question that comes up a lot, and that's, should I talk to the police ahead of time? And before working with Animal Rebellion, I would have said no. I've said like probably never, except for the few small examples of like if you need to arrange having like a permit to do a vigil or something like that. But I usually say absolutely not, but it really now depends on what kind of liaising you're going to do. And I'll talk about that just next. But yeah, so sometimes you want to talk to the police just on saying like what space here is public versus private. If you need a permit to have a demonstration or to be able to have a table and things like that. Oftentimes it's just best to consult a lawyer first to know what you do and do not need to do, because in some circumstances, like in California, like the lawyers are just going to be like, nope, just go, assert your right to protest. It's pretty, self-explanatory. It gives you a really large spectrum to work with. But in other cases in other countries, it's not so much the reality. But also, if you can avoid tipping off the police or having to discuss anything with them, it is usually for the best, again, depending on what kind of liaising you're doing. So another reason why you might want to liaise with the police beforehand is for strategic reasons, including getting the police to work with you and like to gain cooperation. For example, in LA, for the pig vigils, they actually have police there. Like they tell them when the vigil is going to happen, and the police actually go there and they stop the trucks for the activists. So they've kind of put together like a safety issue where the police have to take care of that, which is kind of cool. But before we go into different types of liaising, I want to just quickly open it up to any small questions about anything I've just covered already. Is there anything, Glenn?
Can you repeat the question? So I was working at the same time.
Oh no, I just opened it up to any small questions about anything that I've already just covered.
I think Pizza, I want to say something.
Yes, that's right. I'm like wondering, when is the point when the police wants to start liaising? Like in the beginning, I'm sure they do not want to, but yeah, things change and then they feel like it might be smart to?
Yeah, so it just depends a lot on like the police and the kind of demonstration you're doing and things like that. If you're just going to go picket on, you know, quote unquote picket on the side of the sidewalk, they're not going to care too much, again, depending on what country you're in. But if it's going to be something bigger and you actually reach out to have a conversation beforehand and things like that, then they actually will be open to having discussion with you. It's actually surprising how often they are willing to have a conversation about what's happening, because unsurprisingly, they want to know as much as they can beforehand to know what to expect. But also if they can get you to not do it, or to, you know, talk you down from having arrests, or to, you know, kind of corner you into a box to where you can only, you know, you can only protest right here in this little space or something like that. If they're going to be able to do that, then they would like to do that. And so if that means having a conversation with you, they're going to try to do that. Any other small questions before moving on?
Yeah, so the first time I was a police liaison, I had this fear that, you know, if I go ahead and talk to the police, they're gonna feel like I had something to do with it, right? Like I'm a part of the organizing structure. So I'm pretty sure people would be interested in knowing like just how threatened they should feel when they choose to you know, do this role of being the police liaison, and if you could elaborate on that a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I'll get into specifics of like how to introduce yourself and things like that. But yeah, it definitely feels like pressure of like, oh my God, like now I have to talk to them. And it kind of feels like you're responsible for everything. And they can even tell you, you know, as that deputizing term as I was using before, like they can even tell you, you're in charge, you're responsible for what happens here today. And so it can put quite a lot of pressure on you. But that's not to deter people from doing this role, because it's a really, really important role. And oftentimes it's actually a lot easier than we might think. And especially depending on what kind of liaising you're doing, it's a bit easier. I've done police liaison work with like even like cubes of truth and vigils and things like that. And most of those experiences have been pretty passive. Where the police are just like kind of checking in, like, what are you doing here? And they want to know what's happening. And once they know that it's nonviolent, and that, you know, you're kind of mostly just staying, you know, on the sidewalk or whatever it is, then they don't really care too much. And because especially depending on what country you're in, like in the United States, there's not really much they can do. If you are following the law mostly, and you know it's within your right to protest, they can't really do much. And we see this especially in like San Francisco. They're really not going to bother talking to you most of the time because they're just so used to demonstrations happening. So it's a bit of a spectrum. As you all know, I love to talk about spectrums. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on, because I think some of the questions will be answered in the rest of the slides. So different types of liaising. So we have a few different kinds, and this has been mostly kind of learned recently within Animal Rebellion. So there's radical transparency, facilitation, and no pre-liaison or covert. And that's in regards to the action being covert. So with radical transparency, this is when you're going to set up a meeting with the police beforehand as soon as possible. Like, you know, the action design team has said, okay, we're ready. We're going to post this Facebook page now. Cool. I'm going to send an email to that local police station, and I'm going to say, I would like to set up a meeting with you to discuss this action that's going to take place. And then set up the meeting, go in, and you're going to tell them every detail of the action with the exception of people's names. And this presumes that the action has been so well designed that a win-win outcome will be achieved no matter how and at what stage the police decide to intervene. So an example that's listed is like, police were fully briefed about every aspect of this action called Blood of Our Children. But they did not arrest rebels carrying buckets full of fake blood on their way to Downing Street because they had been warned rebels would immediately empty the bucket's contents wherever the police tried to stop them. So it didn't matter where the police tried to stop them, they were going to empty the contents anyway. So they designed this action so well that no matter what the police did, they were going to win. They were going to be able to meet their goal no matter what. So that is like a perfect example of when radical transparency is great. It means that you're starting to develop a working relationship with the police that you can then leverage, you can then use strategically, and you still win. You still meet your goal no matter what. It's really cool. I didn't know that this was possible before. And I think like it just makes everything smoother in some ways, because then you're also able to say, you know, we fully own up to what we're doing, we're even open about what we're doing, and this puts the police in a bit of a dilemma as well. Then there's another kind that's called facilitation, and this is when you tell the police enough information to keep the action safe. This is what we did for the Arla action. We did have the police liaison reach out ahead of time to set up a meeting. She went in, she had a conversation, and she told them just enough to keep the activists safe. You know, being able to say like, you know, we are decentralized, we're not sure. And this is like, this is true, is that, you know, as Extinction Rebellion or Animal Rebellion, it's a decentralized structure. So there are affinity groups, there are local groups that will be coming. We don't know what they are going to do. They have the freedom to design within that action whatever they would like. So we can't say for sure what will or will not happen in regards to like lock-ons and things like that. So and one thing that we could guarantee was nonviolence, and having the police liaison there and things like that. So whatever you can do to say to them, whatever you can say to them that will not compromise that action, but will still create that working relationship and will also try and keep the activists safe. So we were able to tell them where exactly we would be, that we would be marching down one of the what is it called? Circle something. It's like a really big highway, and that we were going to stay until around 4 o'clock with no guarantee that it would be as early as that it could go on later, and we couldn't make any promises. And then what ended up happening was that they did not block the street off for us. They told us, we're not going to block off the highway for your march. We are not responsible for that. So we did it ourselves, but they did follow us. So it was kind of like they were protecting us anyway. That's their job. They have to protect the people. And then they did actually block off the street at Arla. So that whole block, they blocked off for us in advance, and we didn't have to deal with it. So they contacted the council and made that happen. And in some respect, that worked against us, because had a bit of a defeating kind of flavor to it to have it already blocked off for us. But at the same rate, it did keep everyone safe, and it still won the goal of causing disruption of that main street, because it is a main street where traffic is actually pretty heavy. The bus lines had to be diverted, everything like that. So it's often desirable to have police presence at like a swarming action, for example, or a roadblock, as this can calm the motorists as well, the drivers. And that's something that we noticed as well, is that we had de-escalators at this action, but they were getting quite a bit of trouble from motorists once the police kind of stepped away. So that was an issue. But when the police were there, we didn't even have to deal with those people. So that's another benefit to it. The other type of liaising is no pre-liaison. So no conversation beforehand, not reaching out beforehand. Maybe this means that your action is, you know, not an open organizing action. It's a closed action. Maybe it's like pretty spicy. And that's why you don't want to be open about it. And this means that this action is entirely covert in advance, but you will have a police liaison on the ground to liaise spontaneously and stop the police panicking about the action. So an example that was listed is that we did not inform the police that the rebels would climb on top of the silos at Arla and do a banner drop, but the police liaison was there, and the police would be obligated to warn the company, because the reason why that we didn't tell them beforehand is because the police would be obligated to warn the company beforehand. So that's why we were like, okay, we're just going to keep this covert. But we had a police liaison there, was able to facilitate communication, and that was sorted. But also police liaisons have the mandate in like Animal Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion to maintain and build upon existing relationships with the police, and can offer advice to the action planners on what kind of liaison would suit the particular action. So again, this is particularly just within Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion, but we may see this kind of grow into other activist groups as well, because it is very useful. And so with that being said, like with that transparency, you're able to, like, as much transparency as you can give, that will help create that relationship that you can then leverage and use strategically later. That was quite a ramble. But anyway, so more on the pre-action conversation with the police. Like, what does that look like? I mentioned a little bit about having an action or having a meeting before an action to open up that dialogue with police, and to have that as early as possible. Also, if it's transparent, to give as much information as possible approved by that action design team. So if the organizers say, yeah, tell them we're going to have people locking on, then you can tell them that you're going to have people locking on. But it's important that the action design team gives approval on that beforehand, because it's up to the action design team to design the action in a way that if that is being transparent, then it's going to win out no matter which way it goes with the police. Some of the things that you might want to say in conversations are, you know, we want to work together to prioritize public safety. How can we make sure emergency service route plans are in place? What contingencies can we make for extreme circumstances that happen at the same time as the protest? We want to work together to build trust and to stick to our agreements. These are the plans. We can assist you regarding issues of safety, lost children, hazards, and feedback information about potential infiltration by unwelcome, possibly violent individuals and groups. This is really important, because that means that if you do have like counter protesters, for example, and things like that, then you have already discussed with the police beforehand and have developed a relationship with them. So then you can call upon them to take action and protect your activist group from those protesters if they end up being violent. You can also say, we can assist you, we can draw upon a code of conduct, general agreement in writing. We are not leaders, just conduits, liaison team. You can ask who the senior officer in charge is, how many police are there, how will the policing be structured. So with that open, transparent conversation, you can also ask them what they're going to do, what their plans are. That's one of the other benefits to that. You can ask how many cells will be available, so you can know what to expect and be able to inform your arrestees on what they can expect once they go in. You can even say, hey, we need this many vegan meals available for our arrestees once they go in. Or you can say, you know, like, for example, if this has been decided beforehand that the arrestables are not going to take anything and that they're going to do a fast, you can already have told them ahead of time that they will be doing a hunger strike, so that they are aware of that, and they make sure to pay attention to the safety of those activists. You can also say, we want to ensure you of our nonviolent principles, and give them a paper copy of your principles and values. And if you need to make any arrests, that's okay. You need to do your job. The activists are prepared for that and won't resist arrest or obstruct you. And this will help keep them at ease and keep them de-escalated, because they already know ahead of time that that the activists or protesters aren't going to be violent towards them or trying to fight arrest and things like that. You can also say, if you need to make arrests, what procedures do you have? How much time warning will you give us before you start arresting? Will there be a 5-step warning? Will you use section 14 or 12 to disperse people? And those ones are specific to the UK. What protocols do you have when arresting disabled people, young people, elderly people? It's very, very nice to be able to have this conversation with police, because then when people at your demonstration ask these questions, you know how to respond. You already have an answer that has been taken from the police themselves. And you can also hold them accountable afterwards. So when you have that debriefing, you can hold them accountable for what they said. You can say, assure the police you are available for communication 24/7 and can reply to messages, but do not have control over the activist or the action. And also, you can give them a map of the roadblocks, swarming sites, or procession routes. They love maps and diagrams. So you can also say whether there'll be children present, what the steward to protester ratio is. Oftentimes police will be interested in that for like safety, like how you're going to take safety seriously. You can say these are the banners that mark the front and the back of the march. This is the time we intend to conclude the protest, etc. Some of the things the police might say are, go figure, who's in charge and who makes the decisions? Are we going to answer that?
No, sure not.
Never.
No, not gonna say. And you're definitely gonna say, I'm not the one in charge. I'm just the police liaison. What safety measures do you have in place for this? They might say, how many people are coming exactly? And that's a question that you should have pre-arranged with your action design team as to whether or not you're releasing that information, and so on and so forth. But if you have like a public event page, then you can just refer them to that and say all the information that's public is here. They might ask, are you going to use vehicles, big structures, a PA system? Have you already got permission from the council? Will the protest move? What's your planned route? We're not going to let you do that. They'll probably say that. But it's important to note, okay, the police said they're not going to let us do this. What's our plan B? What's our plan C? How, when are you going to clear up? And hopefully they'll share lots of information about their resources and intentions to protect your right to protest, and tell you what the red lines might be to where they would start needing to arrest people. So things to remember, we're not asking for permission. We're informing the police. So we're not asking them, can I do this protest? Can we do this? We're just saying, you know, this is happening and I'm here to facilitate communication and inform you of what is going to occur. Also saying, again, can't stress this enough. We are liaisons, not organizers. It is a protest, not an event. There's a big legal difference. The police can support our right to protest and do, but an illegally, you know, not pre-approved event is something completely different. Aim to always have a respectful relationship, especially noting down the specific principles and values of whatever group you are representing. Aim to work together, and I know this is a controversial one. All of this bit is a controversial one, and I can see like the eyes rolling in the back of Glenn's head. Because I know a lot of people have a struggle with the idea of like working with the police, but one of the main reasons why I've added all this in here is because I want you to see like that there are benefits actually to working with the police for strategic reasons, to be able to actually facilitate your goals for your activist group. So yes, also, so yeah, respect that the police may have useful information about how things work in the city and other risks in the area. For example, they might tell you at this certain time traffic picks up, there's going to be really aggressive drivers, and you can take note of that and prepare your team to have a plan in place for that. They can help you plan even. We want them to be on our side and helping facilitate economic disruption. For example, they can redirect traffic for us. Give all the info that is available publicly, and maybe more if that is approved by your group. Give all the info if you can. This relieves tension and means the police can plan their use of resources effectively. It's very frustrating for them if there are unknowns, so they have to employ the maximum number of officers just in case. In some cases, that might be a reason to not share that. So just depending on what the goals are of your activist group. They're highly trained to act spontaneously, but it is far less stressful if they can make advanced plans. And this is going to then affect the stressfulness of your demonstration for your activists. So, what kind of situation and dialogue is your police liaison going to have to handle? What kind of, tension and atmosphere is it going to be like for your participants and such? Also respect their relationship with other authorities. They can communicate efficiently and effectively with the council, traffic management, universities, churches, emergency services, etc., and be able to set the tone of your relationship with these other authorities as well. So they can sing our praises and be internal to our good reputation is what the notes say. Also be aware that as a conduit for communication between the activists and the police, you will glean information that others are not party to. It's easy to feel powerful when you have more knowledge, so mitigate against this. It's essentially like, don't necessarily give away all the information in that moment to the police, because then they might feel that they can do more. Chat to the police as fellow humans with kids, companions, views on other issues, offer to share tea, coffee, food, etc. Sometimes I lean against this. It's fine as a police liaison to be able to do that, but part of the reason why I think it's important to have a police liaison is so that everyone knows that they do not talk to the police, that it's only the police liaison that does this. And it's very important to do so and to inform everyone of that, so that it protects them and it protects them from legal risks and such. And as we said before, the whole purpose of having a police liaison is to be able to have clear communication from one individual rather than a bunch of random people talking about different things, maybe giving away information that they didn't know that they were giving away, even because talking to the police can be a bit confusing. They can try and trick you. They will try and trick you. And oftentimes I've seen people say more than they have intended to, or maybe didn't know that what they said could compromise the action or compromise their own safety. So yes. The police will also want to know 3 key things so they can plan their resources: locations, times, and numbers. Okay, let's move on. Putting your police liaison hat on. Well, I think that we went over a lot actually. So if anybody has any brief questions specifically about what I've just covered, if you want to go ahead and ask that now, and Glenn will so kindly check to see if anyone has any questions.
Pete would like to say something.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can be a liaison and an unknown as well at the same time.
I would say like that's a really, really difficult one, because like when you do introduce yourself to the police, in order to have that communication feel legitimate to them, you're going to want to say, "Hi, my name is Cheyenne." You don't necessarily have to right off the bat say, "My name is Cheyenne Danner," but saying your first name is going to be helpful for them. Another thing is like if you say, "Hi," like this is me, "Hi, my name is Raven," and my name is not Raven, then depending on where you are, that can actually be used against you as that you lied to the police. And so it's important to like not lie to the police, because that can put you in jeopardy of some other legal stuff, like contempt and things like that. So I would say it's really difficult to say yes to that. So I'm going to say no for now. Does anybody else have any questions?
Nobody Um,
Okay. Cool. So
else asked in the chat, can you just mention no name even if they don't like it?
Yeah, or it was not even a question. It was more like you can also just not mention your name, because I think Cheyenne said like the police will not facilitate communication or whatever. But I think like we don't always have to be liked by the police, so you can just decide not to tell your name and be anonymous, I think.
yeah, and so typically, so like that is something that I would say would be most relevant to participants. For the police liaison, I don't recommend doing that. It's something that you can choose to do, but I don't recommend doing that because from my experience, you want to have, like, the police liaison is not part of the demonstration. They are kind of serving as a third party. And so if you're not telling them your name, you're then like not really willing to communicate in their eyes. That's the way that they see it. And we want them to feel like they can fluidly talk to us and that what's coming out of your mouth is going to be something that they can take as, legitimate. So it's more like as a sign of respect rather than a sign of agreement. Because just because I am respectful towards an individual doesn't mean that I agree with what they're doing or what they say or anything like that. It doesn't even mean I like them. I don't necessarily like police, but I do choose to have a respectful relationship with them, and so that's the main reason why I think that it's important. But again, this is all like interpreted the way that you interpret it. So yeah. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on because there's still quite a bit to cover, and I don't want this to be a 5-hour long workshop because people have other things that they probably want to do. And I started off saying I'm hungry and others did as well. So hopefully other people have gotten some snacks. Okay, so putting on your police liaison hat, what does that mean? This is my lovely friend, Paul Picklesheimer, who is often the police liaison for actions with Direct Action Everywhere in Berkeley. And he literally wears a pink hat. He puts his police liaison hat on. And it's really helpful if you're able to wear like a high vis or, a pink hat or a hat with one of those little pinwheels on the top, whatever it is, like something that is going to make you stand out a bit so that, everyone in the group can just say, like if the police come up to them, they can say, I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm, no comment. You can talk to the police liaison who's over there in the pink hat. They don't have to say their name, nothing like that. So then that police liaison can start conversation when they please. Prepare all of the activists in your briefing, and this is something that the police liaison should ensure that the organizers do. That the organizers beforehand give everyone directions on what to do if the police talk to them. Like I said, if that means directing them to the guy in the pink hat, if that means, it should mean don't talk to the police other than saying talk to the person in the pink hat. Physical description rather than name is preferable there. Most of the time, the thing that makes the biggest difference when talking to the police is having the right attitude. So when you put that police liaison hat on, you're also putting on that role. You want to be very confident, but also very respectful. You want to demand and provide respect. Police can smell fear. They're used to interacting with people who are either terrified of their authority or belligerent and aggressive. So if you are able to be calm and level-headed, respectful, and also confident in asserting your rights, they are more likely to see you as an equal. But sadly, the reality is, like I said in the beginning, like I, as a white passing person, have huge advantage when interacting with police, so they will view me and treat me differently. If you are someone who's really afraid of the police, this is probably not a good role for you until you are able to get over that a bit. And that is a serious thing because, again, like I said in the beginning, the whole activist group is relying on you to be able to do this job well. And if you are either afraid of the police, or you have like this really, really strong, aggressive like hatred towards them, or whatever it is. And that might be because you've had some really negative experiences in the past, or you know, just authority in general makes certain feelings come up for you, and that's totally okay, and that is normal. A lot of people have that. But for this specific role, if you don't feel ready to do that, that's okay, but it's something that you need to kind of think about for yourself and acknowledge. So what is your demeanor during the demonstration? So staying calm, being assertive, not aggressive, be polite and firm, no sass or sarcasm as much as you might want to. You see Glenn laughing because he probably wants to be super sassy all the time. Be clear that your role is to facilitate communication, and remember, your role is to best protect and serve the needs of the demonstrators, not to escalate tension with the police. Can be really difficult to stay calm when threatened with arrest, or your friends are threatened with arrest, but that's just the nature of the job. I usually just say my first name as a test, and we'll get into that about like how I introduce myself to the police. But yeah, basically you have that demeanor, and now you're ready to talk to them. Introducing yourself to the police. So this is going to depend on what kind of liaising you're doing. If you've had a conversation with them before, that will be your first time introducing yourself. And if that's a transparent liaising, then during the demonstration, you're going to go ahead and go right up to them and say, hey, I'm the police liaison. I've already talked to officer such and such beforehand. You know, these are the changes that have been made, or whatever. But if that's not the case, and it's either covert or you haven't done any liaising pre-action, then you want to stay close to the officers. And if police approach people taking nonviolent action, that's when you want to intercept them and explain that you are the police liaison, maybe even again. So depending on what you've decided with your action design team, you may go ahead and introduce yourself right away, but usually you're just going to wait for them to approach. And you're kind of gonna like, woo, just kidding. There's the activist going by me, and you're gonna talk to me instead. And you wanna give the police the least amount of information necessary at that point. So yeah, sometimes I will go and introduce myself as soon as they get there, but you know, you can just wait it out and see what they're doing, what's their mood, kind of get a read on them. If they're looking agitated, I'll probably go and talk to them right away to start de-escalating. But if they look confused, I will wait, because sometimes they don't know what to do, and sometimes they want you to leave, but they don't know how to convey that to a large crowd of chanting activists with no obvious leader. So they can kind of just figure it out for a while, and that's a good stalling technique as well. If they start talking to a manager at a store that we're disrupting, I'll go and I'll start talking to the manager. And if you're lucky, the manager will talk to you and not to the police. So then maybe the manager will say, I want you all to leave now, at which point you should probably get people moving towards the doors if people don't want to get cited. Often at disruptions, the goal is to leave before the police even get there, or as soon as they do. So if they show up while people are still demonstrating and the plan is for people to be leaving, then check in with your protest marshal and go to the police to introduce yourself. I've said in the past, we're not protesting, we're delivering a message to management, or we're just talking loudly with each other and the customers, or we're just finishing up and we're leaving soon, or we're leaving now. So those are all different things that you can say in response to what they're saying of leave now. But yes, so introducing yourself. As you see the police approaching the demonstrators, then you walk up and greet them, reach out your hand. And a lot of people are going to be like, I don't want to touch their hand, but just do it. Just reach out your hand, shake their hand, introduce yourself with respect of, you know, hi, my name is Cheyenne. And here it says optional if you can give your name. And I gave my reasonings as to why I would ideally do that. But yes, ideally get the officer's name and write that down. We'll talk a little bit more about record keeping later. I usually will say my first name as a test. This is mainly in the States. If they insist on having my last name, I'll ask them if I'm being detained. If they say no, then I will say, you don't need my last name. If they say yes, but not with sass, just you don't need my last name. If they say yes, I will say, or if they say yes in terms of, yes, I'm being detained, then I will tell them, then sadly I won't be able to perform my duties as a police liaison. And you can say additionally, like, I will do my best to see if someone else can replace me, but this will complicate the ability to facilitate communication between yourselves and the activists. In the past, they've tried different tactics to get name and information. For example, a policewoman will say, could I take down your name and phone number so I can contact you as police liaison? And you can just say in response, no thanks, I'll be around so that you can find me. So that's one of their little sneaky ways of trying to get more information out of you. Cool, let's see.
Douglas wants to say something or ask something.
Go ahead. All of a sudden I started craving roasted marshmallows. I don't know why, but
Hey.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was just that you said a couple times like we are leaving now, or we're just doing this, we're just doing that, and it's just emphasized the use of like they, and that you're not a part of it. Is that right?
Yeah, so primarily, thank you for pointing that out, because that's really important. Primarily, you're going to want to say them and like remove yourself from being part of the activist group. It just depends on the situation, because for example, like with DXE, it's not really like when you're inside disrupting a store and you're just leaving, saying like we're leaving now, it's including you. Like everyone's going to be leaving. So that's kind of like where the distinction would be made. Whereas otherwise, if like you're going to say they're leaving now, I will stay and remain with the activists who are still locked on to be able to facilitate communication between you and them. So it just depends on that. So, but making the distinction between yourself and the other activists in that situation is still very important. So thank you for bringing that up. It's something that will slip out a lot. So yes. Okay, let's see. And also I just need to update my notes on that. There was a police officer who I'll be talking about a bit later that said something like, thank you all for being so peaceful. And he took out his card and wrote his number on it, and he handed it to the police liaison and said, if you need anything, you can contact me here. Can I get your information so I can contact you too? And the police liaison said, oh, no, thank you. Because, you know, you want to remain respectful, but also like, you're not going to give out that information. It's just not necessary unless you're doing like a, you know, transparent liaising and you have given them an email address that at which you can be contacted at, then that's a different story. I would recommend having an email address that doesn't include your name and your phone number and all this other stuff, all these other details that could potentially be connected to your email. Just having one that's private, just used for that. Maybe even just used through, you know, that says like police liaison or something on it. So here is the bit where I'm hoping that we might be able to do a role playing on here if Zoom cooperates. So basically when you want to introduce yourself, you say, hello, I'm the police liaison for the group. This is where you can say your name. I'm here to make sure we have clear communication between police and the folks taking nonviolent action. I prefer to say it in this way instead of saying that people protesting or the people locking on or whatever it is, just like people taking nonviolent action to make it really kind of general. If there's anything you want to communicate to these folks, you can do that through me. So I would love to go ahead and practice that if we're able to pair people up or put people in groups, because it helps you to be able to have already said this in the past. It gets you used to being able to say that, and especially when talking to the police, it's very intimidating. So if you've practiced it in the past, it's kind of like muscle memory, and it just kind of comes out. Honestly, at this point, it is muscle memory for me. I can say it like without even thinking about it. So that is why it's important to practice. So I think maybe Glenn, you might actually have to do this. I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen. I think manage. I don't know how to do that actually. I think maybe I'll, oh, there we go. Hello, I'm back. So let's see, maybe it's manage participants. Glenn, do you know how to put people in?
Yeah,
there?
sorry, I was talking with my mic muted. I was asking how many people are in a group? We have 25 now.
You leave me out of it. So, oh yeah, yeah, there's 25 then.
I'm in it 2
pairing
times.
people up.
I'm in the group 2 times because one time it's just for my screen on my PC and I needed to go on my telephone as well for the video.
Okay, so that should give us an even amount of people besides, I think, Ender, because you've got 2 in there. But yeah, so if you want to just put it, I think it can automatically just filter people into groups of 2. Ben says that they can't participate. So.
Yeah, we have 3 to 4, 2 to 3 participants in one room, but that will, I think, include you as well.
That's okay.
I see Emma raised her hand. I don't know if she wanted to say something before we go into groups.
Yeah, I can also not participate to this little session, but I'm hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's try this.
And I will put the little intro thingy of what to say in the
I think.
Joffrey wants to ask something, I believe.
Yeah, indeed. I still have a question about the information you're giving the police. So first you said that it's important to give your name to show that you're willing to cooperate with them and as a sign of respect. And then you said that if they ask you for more information, like the way to contact you, etc., you can deny that. So what are you giving? Do you only give your first name, or do you give your last name as well, or you don't give any contact information like telephone number, or maybe only an email address that has been talked about before?
Yeah, so again, it's going to depend a little bit on what kind of liaising you're doing. So if this is in a transparent kind of liaising situation, then you can tell them, you know, my name is Cheyenne Danner, and this is how you can contact me with this email address that is specifically only used for this situation. But if it is like a covert, or if it's like minimal information and things like that, especially if it's something that's going to be like higher risk, maybe you're, you know, doing a farm occupation or something like that, I preferably, as a police liaison myself, I do feel comfortable giving them my first name, and hopefully they don't like require that I give them my last name without detaining me, because in the United States, like at least in the United States, like you are required to give them your identification. And so that means, and that doesn't matter if you're the police liaison or not. So that means that you have to give them your first name and your last name, your date of birth and your address. You don't have to give them a phone number, anything like that. That is required if you're being detained. So that's why I ask, am I being detained? If not, then I say you don't need that information. If I am being detained, then that's when you have to give them that information. That's specific to the United States, and so having clarification from a lawyer would be preferable, like depending on your country.
All righty, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for asking the clarifying question.
Cheyenne, how long do you want them to be in a group?
6 minutes, 5-6 minutes, something like that.
Okay.
Should be enough for each person to have a turn practicing.
Yeah. I see now we have groups of 2 and 3, I think. And you're not in one of them. So, yeah. Everybody ready?
I'm gonna just type this up really quick. Liaison.
Just say when I can split people into groups.
Pete wants to ask something.
Okay.
Hi, it might be helpful if you just gave us like a scenario that we, something like, a scenario that we can work with. Like we're outside Arla, they have climbed on top of the silos. It was an unannounced thing, or a game that we know what the background is.
Okay. Give me 2 seconds to type this out, and then I'll give you one. Anything you want to communicate to these. Okay, so I've just sent the little introduction in the chat. And that's the primary part that you'll be practicing. But yeah, essentially, yeah, let's go with the one that you suggested, Pete. Of, we're at Arla, which is a big dairy facility, dairy distribution facility, and they have these big silos where they have like milk to be processed inside, and 2 activists have taken a ladder and they've climbed up to the top of the silos to drop banners, and they're up there now. And so now the police have been called, they're on site, and they're now like talking to each other about what they're going to do next. And in this situation, they can't get physically to the activists yet, but they see that you and another group of people are on the ground. So they approach you, and that's when they approach the whole group. So this is when you're going to step in and talk to them. And magically, you're all going to be funneled into little groups. So
you have 6 minutes, and after 5 minutes, there will be a clock which will count down that it's your last minute. But if you would be done, you can come back early. Cheyenne, if you do not accept it, you should stay with myself.
Okay. Have fun, everyone. So I would love to hear how people felt with that. Like, how did it feel to kind of do that little intro and stuff?
Stressed.
Stressed? Anything else? Did anyone feel really relaxed? Nervous?
Yeah, I felt relaxed. But it's just the thing, it's just the way it is, and you're just telling it to them. So it feels quite relaxed to do.
This guy over here, I completely forgot that he was the police liaison at the action. I'm like, what are you even doing in here? You already know how to do it with my 5-minute prep that I gave him.
I know nothing.
Oh, you're a pro.
He was great. He did a great
It's a
job.
natural.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else have anything that they want to share, or any questions about that kind of introduction?
Sarah, Gaia raised their hand.
Yeah, I have only a question. We were a group of 3, so we split in one police liaison and one officer, one cop, and I mainly heard the conversation about the 2. And my question is, the policer asked the liaison to bring the people down from the silo, and if he can do that, and he say, yeah, I can ask them. Then return saying they will come down, but only if we are going to protest for like half an hour. Like, we can protest for half an hour. My question was, isn't that negotiation or not?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So at that point, so if you have demonstrators that are up on a silo or up on a I won't say it, Doug, but on one of those big tall things, like built up things, then essentially they are their own negotiators at that point, because they are acting autonomously. So if you have like the big group, they will have their own negotiator, which is usually like one of the organizers or someone who has been briefed and trained beforehand to do that. But essentially, yeah, I would see it as the people on the silo are their own negotiators, and the police liaison is essentially saying like, well, this is what they are willing to do, and this is what they want to negotiate with you. And so I'm saying as the police liaison, like, this is not my decision. I can't say yes, they'll come down. I can ask them if they are willing to do that. And I will let you know what their response is. So literally, like, you're just a mouthpiece back and forth. And it's just essentially being mindful of like what information you do share and how you talk to them, and knowing your rights and being able to assert that and stuff like that. But yeah, you're not the negotiator. That's a good question. Anything else come up? Any other kind of questions or anything? Joffrey?
Yeah, me and Puppy Dog, we immediately noticed the importance of knowing what you have to say and what you can say in the set environment. So in the country or in the state you're in. So we were adopting if you had to say our first name or full name to give something. So it's really important to know these facts and to be, like you said before, sure about it and confident about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when I started doing police liaison trainings, it was only in California and specifically like in the Bay Area. And so it was really specific and really easy to give answers to specific questions because we knew the law like specific to that area. We knew about like certain circumstances where the police act in certain ways. And so like I was really familiar with that. But as I've gotten to like traveling and giving workshops like this, like that are, I mean, from people from all over the world, it's just become a little bit more difficult each time to be able to give specific information because it's just really uncertain. The laws differ so much from country to country. And again, that's why one of the first slides that I shared was know your rights. Know what your rights are specific to you in your country, in your city, in your town, that kind of thing. And as an activist, like, what are the protest specific laws? Like, do you have the right to protest? Do you have, the freedom of speech in your country? Things like that. Because like something I just learned recently was that in certain countries, and like I think it's like 2/3 of the world, it's illegal for women to be able to think for themselves. So that's how different laws can be. That just as a woman demonstrating, that's like considered like in certain countries as defying the law of God and things like that. So know your rights, know what's specific to your area. And this can also give you some really awesome, loopholes to things because, for example, in Belgium, there really isn't a law for trespassing. It really isn't a thing. And so you wouldn't have known that had you not gone to a lawyer and gotten that information. And that's what Glenn did. So that's another awesome reason to know your rights. It's just like, this should be taught in school, but it's not. And it's just really crazy. But maybe it's that if we all knew our rights, we would be more likely to actually do something about things and use our rights for things like this. So, better to keep us dumb and uninformed so that we don't actually do that. It's crazy. Cool. So if there's no other, Ender also had a question. And Elliot, Elliot had a question first, I think.
Shit. Okay.
Sorry.
Ender go first because it was kind of something you were saying that I was just going to say.
Okay, Ender.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Just start eating something.
You said it's obvious we shouldn't lie to the police. But if I don't want to tell them my name, can I say instead of my name is, you can call me?
That's something that I feel uncomfortable being able to give like a certainty, kind of like a certain answer to, because again, like I don't know what the laws are in your area. I'm not a lawyer. And so, that's a good question to ask in a Know Your Rights training of like, yeah, can I just be like, hey, you can call me, Rose, you can call me, Pink Lady, whatever. Like, that would be great if you can, because that would give you that option. But also, like, what the police hear, they interpret in different ways. And so if they say, or if they hear you say, you can call me this, they can say that that's interpreted in that you're saying that that's your name. And like, so it's kind of playing with things a bit, and that makes me personally feel uneasy. I'd rather just be like, I'm not going to tell you, if I'm really just going to not want them to know, then I would rather just say, I'm not going to tell you, no comment, whatever. But I've stated, already, like, why I do have a preference for at least giving them my first name. But it's up to you guys. Yeah. Anything else before we move on?
What about a nickname, like something everybody uses, like you identify yourself as that nickname? Or does it need to be like your legal name always? Or does it also depend on like the
I think it just depends, honestly. I think that's more of a question to ask a lawyer, just because it's really interesting how like specific it can be in certain countries, of like, if you say this or that, that's lying, or if you don't say your name when you're asked to, then that's like, that works against you legally. It's just really hard to know how it's going to be where you are. But it's a good thing to note down, to be able to ask in your Know Your Rights training, because everyone in this Zoom call is going to get a Know Your Rights training, right? Cool. So let's go ahead and move on, because there's some exciting, well, I think exciting. I feel like such a nerd saying exciting, but it's exciting stuff, because we're going to talk about, look at this. I just had this big view of Glenn pop up on my screen. It's great. So yeah, why I think it's exciting is because I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. But oh wait, I did this wrong anyway. Let me unshare.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Since we're not allowed to lie, if we get asked, like, do you know this, and you do know it, then what do you do as a liaison officer?
Yeah. This can be tricky. So like, if it's easy to prove that you did know, then that's going to be a big issue for you. That's why it's preferable that like organizers have that in mind, that they shouldn't tell certain things to the police liaison, because then that puts them in jeopardy. This gets into a bit of security culture stuff, about like the different layers of security culture within organizing groups, and I guess your clearance, we can call it, what your security clearance is. So the lead organizer will have the most security clearance, because they will know the ins and outs of what everything will look like, except for, let's say, an action that will have like affinity groups, which are groups that come in that have autonomy, that can do what they want. And this is more relevant to like non-hierarchical designed like structured groups like Extinction Rebellion. So they'll come in and they kind of do whatever they want. The police liaison has no idea what they're going to do. The organizers may have no idea what they're going to do. Like I was the lead organizer for the Arla action. I knew affinity groups were going to come. I knew they were going to do something spicy. I did not know what they were going to do. I didn't know what they had planned, and I didn't know when it was going to happen. I could maybe insert myself and like, give them some guidance on when that should happen and stuff like that. But for the most part, I wasn't even cleared security wise for that kind of stuff. So important to have a kind of like clearance level if you're going to do something covert. If it's super open and you do know, but, you know, like for example, you know, it was obvious that we were going to block the street at Arla that was open. We were talking about occupying, things like that. So the police liaison did know, and they had been given clearance to be able to communicate that to the police. So they know that. They should say, yes, they're going to be blocking the street. For how long? They said until this time, but they also said that they weren't sure and they couldn't give an exact answer or commitment to a specific time, that kind of thing. It has to be really clear. Clear on your vagueness, we'll put it that way.
Thanks for that.
Pete says, you could say it's not my role to tell you that information.
Yeah, it is kind of your role to tell them that information, but you'll have to, you can just play it as, I need to speak to the negotiator about that, or I need to speak to the group. You can also say like, there's a group decision-making process, only if that is true. There's a group decision-making process. I need to speak to them in order to give you that information. So that doesn't mean you know or you don't know. It just means that you have to talk to the group in order to give that information. So.
And Stefan says, is this a case you as a liaison can refer to the group as is autonomous?
Yeah, you can say that. So, you know, if in fact it is an autonomous group, you know, that's decentralized, and only if then, I would say, you know, this is a group decision-making process, or, you know, they are working autonomously and there are several different, you know, groups within this larger group. And so there, you know, the organizer of one group doesn't have control of the other. And so I'll have to speak to them as well and like facilitate communication between. Yeah, I guess I think that's as clear as I can make that sound. Let me go ahead and go back to our slideshow here. All right, so introducing yourself a police liaison, that was fun. Yeah, and also you can take a screenshot of this to keep with you for later to continue to practice, and, you know, do some role playing with some friends, things like that. All right, stalling for time, my most favorite thing to do as a police liaison. Glenn is laughing so hard. All right, so stalling for time. Basically, we want to do this to be able to help the main group to continue to do what they are intending to do. So whether that means like they just need 5 more minutes, or you know they need a little distraction time in order for the people to get up on the big built thing that they are putting in the middle of the street, whatever it is, like the activists have a goal, that goal should be communicated in advance to the police liaison by the marshal. So that should mean like, okay, marshal says to the police liaison, we want to disrupt this grocery store until the police arrive, or we want to disrupt this grocery store and we're not going to leave until our demands are met. Whatever that goal is, then that should be communicated to the police liaison. So basically, this stalling for time, you can get creative. This is going to be your moment to shine, your moment to try and help these activists meet their goal as best as possible. And that can even mean, you know, I don't know what I was going to say. Let's just forget that thought. Okay, so you can explain that the group has a collaborative decision-making process. A lot of groups do have this, so make sure that is actually the way that the group works. You know, if in fact it's a consensus-based group, then, you know, you can say as such. If we do stall by explaining the group is consensus based, then people better be talking, or they'll think that you're a liar, or that the activists are just ignoring them, neither of which is helpful. So it's like, if you are the police liaison and you're saying that, make sure that you don't just go to the organizers, but you've gone to a couple different people, or you've kind of gathered a group of randoms with the organizers mixed in there, because you are risking implicating the organizers and like pointing them out. And this can be super obvious when this happens. So trying to be a little bit sly about that is important. Never lie if one person is in charge. Don't say it's consensus based. This is difficult to do, but we want to know ahead of time what information can be shared with police and what can't. Let's see, like for example, they'll often ask, who do you represent, or what group is this? And when it's a DXE action, you always answer, this is a part of DXE. When police ask something, respond. Would you like me to take your question to the group? So this is like an obvious one. It's like the police have just asked you, okay, I want you to tell them that they need to move now. And obviously they just told you to go and tell them. But to stall for that few extra seconds, you can say, would you like me to take your question to the group now? And then when they say yes, you can say, okay, can I leave now to go do that? So just like adding in that extra little like completely unnecessary question, but like basically don't make any assumptions. Ask every question that you can that would otherwise be an assumption in order to stall for that extra 3 seconds. And yes, again, if they say yes, talk to several people before coming back to the police. There's so many different ways to stall for time, though. There really is. There's this way as well. This is specific to California. And again, another reason why you should talk to a lawyer and really understand the law in your area. Glenn, for example, knows that trespassing is not a thing in Belgium, and that was discovered through this. So this is called the Prune Yard Shopping Center versus Robbins case. There's a newly updated one that's called something I forget what it's called. I think it starts with an N, but it doesn't really matter. This is what you would have to show. This only works in California, but you might actually have similar local laws that basically say that you can protest in places that many think you can't. So this is like an open shopping center where you can kind of like you're walking outside in order to get to the different shops and things. And basically, if you're protesting there and the police say you can't protest here, this is private property, you can show them this. You just have to take a screenshot, and this is from Wikipedia. Take a screenshot, have it on your phone, show it to them, or have like a button on your phone linked to the website so you can show the content to the police. And we've actually had an officer who went from very aggressive, threatening to arrest everyone, to bored after this was shown to him and explained the law, meaning that he knew the law, but he was ignoring it. And this is something that happens often, is that they know that this is the way that the law works, and they know that this certain section or penal code or something like that exists, but they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to willingly give you knowledge of your rights. You need to already know them. So really nice little stalling tactic. I've used this as well, and I think this bought me at least an hour and a half to 2 hours with the police, because we're kind of just going back and forth of like, well, what do you mean this doesn't apply here? Is this, you said this is a shopping center, is it not? Yes, it is a shopping center, but this, that, and the other thing. Okay, but does that mean this? And how would it be different? What if we had only 3 people here? Would that be different? Would you still say that? Or how about if we were only women? I don't know, just like play with them. How about if we weren't talking about, or like, no, excuse me, don't say we. How about if they were only talking about, if they weren't talking about animals and they were talking instead about, politics or something like that? Would this still apply? What if it was a religious thing? Would it still apply? And this is important to keep on your record keeping as well, of like what their answers end up being. I'll talk about record keeping later, but this has been used in the past for me to be able to keep records of what their response was to this specific law. And so basically that was then opened up a space to be able to then sue the city. So really great to be able to have that option. Okay.
There are two questions. First Douglas and second Pete.
Hello. Yeah, I had a question about relaying, like, the information, like you said, like actual information that the police want to tell them. So they're like, you have to tell them that what they're doing is illegal and we're going to arrest them. Is that information that you would pass on, or is that like, at what point do you like, that is not my job? You like police people, you actually have to do something.
Well, I think like this is specific to like XR, like when I've seen this actually happen, especially in the UK. So the police do give the activists a warning, probably multiple warnings, things like that. But anyway, so this is communicated to the police liaison, and the police liaison then can end up telling the organizers. They can maybe sometimes make an announcement. Sometimes that can backfire, as we saw our police liaison get arrested because he basically dressed up as a giant P and made himself into one of the group, which got him arrested. So basically, you can tell them, hey, it's not my job to, tell them that this is the moment when they're going to be arrested, but I can let them know that you have communicated that to me. But it's not your job to give them their warning. That's their job. So you can say that directly to them. Like, I'm not, what is the word? I'm not
Obliged, obligated?
Not obligated, but like, I don't have the authority to give them that warning. You have the authority to do that. I don't. I'm only here to help facilitate communication. And it's helpful to like reiterate the same thing over and over again of like, I'm only here to facilitate communication. So I will facilitate the communication of what you just said back to the group, but that's all I can do. Does that answer your question? Doug?
Yes, yeah, it does. Because I've overheard extra people saying like, don't give people warnings, don't tell them, like, yeah. Obviously related to section 14, you never say anything.
Yeah, that's a section 14 thing. That's like the only time that I've ever seen that. And so in that case, like, that's different. If it's like a dispersal order kind of thing, and like once people hear it or have been warned by anyone, if they are made aware of the fact that this dispersal order has been put into place, then they are basically like under arrest. Then that's different. I wouldn't do that, because I would just say, it's not my job to let them know that. I will stay here and to help facilitate any other communication that you have. Let me know what you want to tell them. That's about it. Because this dispersal order, it's so super weird, because I've only ever seen it in the UK, and it was even considered unconstitutional, because you're allowed to protest. But essentially it was like, if I told Glenn, oh my God, did you know that there's a dispersal order, and that was caught on camera, or police heard that and then they didn't leave, the person that you told didn't leave, then they would be arrested. Super interesting how that works. So yeah, section 14, fantastic. We called it section 5 a day as our code, like 5 fruits and veg a day. Anyway, let me move on to Pete's question and then quickly into pitfalls. Pete?
Yes, I have 2. So do you want to do them one by one?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, the first one is, can you lie to the police to stall time if you know they will never find out? For instance, you say like, Yeah, there are 8 organizers inside, so we have to form like a new ID, or we have to agree with 8 organizers, and then in the end, if there will be a case, they will still be looking for like 8 organizers, and there might be just 1 or 2. So it also kind of protects the people, maybe because they're still looking for those 8 organizers. Is that wise to do?
So that's not your job as the police liaison to like come up with more advanced deception and things like that for the police to have to deal with. That's not in your mandate, we'll call it. That's really playing with fire as well, because like especially in the United States, then that could be wrapped into now you have what is it called? Conspiracy. So now you're part of a conspiracy, and that's not good. Like you are a third party. You're not part of the demonstration. Don't have that mentality on, because then it'll complicate everything that you share with the police and what's shared to you and things like that. Your role is to facilitate communication and try to do that as effectively as possible and as clearly as possible both ways.
It might even endanger like the other people, like just prosecuting 8 people as organizers, maybe. Even though they're not. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. I mean, and then you've also already told them, now you've told them that there's organizers and you've told them where the organizers are and things like that. It's also not your call. That is the call of the organizers of the action to determine. So as a police liaison, again, you're not making decisions. So that's still up to the marshal or the organizers of the demonstration.
Yeah. Okay.
What was your other question?
Well, there's sometimes there's like in the Europe, you have like separate countries, of course, and like those laws are sometimes like different than like the national laws. So, like to stall time, is it interesting to have a few? Let me see what the translation was. Case laws with you to say like, hey, these demonstrations have been done before, and you can read it here and here, and this is what the outcome of the judge will. So we are, or they are thinking that this is lawful, and then you have at least have them reading through maybe 3 pages, and then like then you almost insinuating you have the law on your side, even though you might not even have it, but still.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting tactic to consider trying. I haven't tried that personally. I think like the concerns that I would have is like how aggravated will that potentially make police if they feel like you're undermining their authority or things like that. You know, there's certain instances where like, you know, you are sort of undermining their authority in a sense, but not really. You're more like telling them to enforce what they're supposed to enforce. Like your job is to enforce the law. This is the law, enforce it. You know, the law says that I have the right to, or that they have the right to protest. They're asking you to enforce that law. So when you start playing with things, it kind of falls more under like strategy of like action design strategy and stuff like that. And so that's kind of like leaning into another space that's a bit outside of the mandate of a police liaison to decide. But it's an interesting tactic to consider.
Okay.
I would have to look more into it, and you'd have to know like the legal ramifications and things like that. But it is an interesting tactic to consider. Sorry, I'm losing my words. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so I am going to try and push on forward because we still have quite a bit of, not quite a bit, but a decent amount of content to cover, and I want to cover it fast since we've been on here for quite some time. So we have police liaison pitfalls. So I mentioned being deputized. That's when police basically say like, you know, you're in charge, and that puts you in jeopardy of being arrested. And also like having those like conspiracy charges put on you, or like being deemed the organizer, things like that. Also, you can end up helping the police execute their agenda rather than helping facilitate smooth execution of the action's objectives. It's really interesting how friendly police seem, and they'll say like, you know, they're on your side and all this stuff, and you know, you might think to yourself, wow, this police officer is actually being really reasonable, and what they're saying actually makes a lot of sense. I should try to help them. And sometimes they are reasonable and just doing their job, and it's not our job to help them. It's our job to help the activists, and in the long run, we believe we are helping everyone. So in the long run, you are helping the police in their individual, like, human capacity. Or the real help is by making the world a better place for everyone, them included, essentially. So yes, don't, like, that is very common that we see all the time. Like, police will say that they're vegan, all this other stuff. Like, it's just a tactic, and I'll go over police tactics next. But also becoming considered in charge by the police, again, pretty much the same as deputizing. Inefficient knowledge of goals of protesters. So you might not know if the demonstrators just want to be there and like until they've been there for 4 hours, or if they have the goal of arrests, so they're going to wait until arrests happen, and things like that. So it's very important that a conversation is had between action designers or the marshal organizers of the action and the police liaison about what specific goals should be facilitated beforehand. Basically, we need to know what the most important thing to accomplish is. Is it vital, for example, is it a visual? Is it outreach? Is it saving an animal? How much time do the activists need, and where do they need it? For example, like, do they need the megaphone? Or if we stop using it, could that buy us an extra 15 minutes? If that's okay. You know, like, if that's what the police are saying, like, you can't use a megaphone, but we need to use a megaphone for this demonstration, then that's going to be a problem. But if it's not necessary to have that megaphone, you can buy yourself some more time. So some police tactics. Oh my gosh. Good cop, bad cop, everything in between. So we have being intimidating. Police are really good at being intimidating. We have to show them that we don't have fear or anger towards them, neither. Fear, and they know they can lean harder and you will break. Anger and courage is more anger. So be careful of the officer as well, who is pretending to be nice and friendly. Unfortunately, we have to treat all the officers the same. Even the officer who might genuinely want to be helpful to us, we have to treat them just the same as the officer who is pretending. So you can't, I mean, you just can't tell the difference. And even if they are genuinely being helpful, once you say something illegal, they become the other officer, or they're just there to do their job. So these are the three primary ways police will interact with you. They're either overtly aggressive in an attempt to intimidate you. They'll pretend to be nice and friendly in an attempt to trick you into revealing information, or they will be legitimately friendly and interested in your work. Now with the last two, again, we have to treat them the same because we really just have no way of knowing their true intentions. So when police are nice and polite, we want to be the same way. Don't relax, but also don't allow the situation to escalate. Be firm but cooperative. So this guy, Officer Gonzalez in Oakland, California. This is what he said to some of the activists. I'm vegan. I totally support your cause. You're being very peaceful, and we appreciate that. You know, my father was actually a veterinarian. I agree with you all. So doesn't this guy sound super nice and super friendly? I'm like, wow, this is a nice guy. He's a genuinely cool cop. Like, you know, I'm like, part of me even feels like, wow, I'm so glad that he's the cop around this area making everything safe. Well, 5 years and 7 months later, Gary King Jr. was shot to death by the same police officer in Oakland. And he was he was mistook for a 20-year-old exiting a store on the street corner. Wait, I can't read this right. My eyes are going. So the officer mistook him, this 20-year-old exiting the store on the street corner, for a murder robbery suspect, and ensuing confrontation left the young man with 2 gunshot wounds in his back, handcuffed and bleeding to death. So that same cop that we think is so nice, so friendly, nice little beat cop from your area, whatever, that's vegan, has a veterinarian father, he shot some young man in the back while he was handcuffed, bleeding to death. So we can't trust cops, actually. This is like such a perfect example of how much we can't trust them. Like the next cop might actually be a really nice guy, genuinely nice guy, but I don't know. I don't know what his true intentions are. I don't know what he's capable of. I do know what's possible for him to be capable of, and it could be this, or it could be something quite nice. This is why we have to just be very conscious and mindful to treat them all equally, that they are all police officers. They're doing their job, and they're going to do the job the way that they were trained to do the job, and we have no control over that. Some of the things that police might say to you are, we're going to enforce this section with conditions and starting arrest at this time at this location. They can say, we have observed these risks. Children keep climbing on the top of a phone box, etc. And so you need to, figure something out about this. We have observed these offenses. We have observed that this swarming is causing particular disruption. Could we reduce the blocks to 5 minutes? And this is up to you if you want to suggest this to the activists. Who's really in charge here? Remind them if it's a decentralized action, that there is no specific individual that's in charge. And they might even say you're in charge or responsible for what's happening here. So interaction in terms of intensity and how to respond. So it kind of goes from easiest to most difficult. So police can try, there could be no police at all, which is like a lovely day for police liaison. You don't have to do anything. Or the police can actually try to help. That's like the best case scenario. Like, for example, in LA, where they actually stop the trucks for us. So that's best case. Move up the ladder a bit. Police politely ask you to move. This is very, very much so the case in San Francisco. They may ask politely. They might not do anything about it. They might not even enforce that. But you politely state that you have the right to be there, in terms of they have the right to be there, not you, but politely state that the activists have the right to be there and that they intend to invoke their rights. It's very important at this point to check, or to have checked even beforehand, but to check again on people's risk level, because it can go from politely asking to checking IDs and citation really quickly. So being aware of what people's risk aversion is ahead of time in the briefing, so that that people know that when, quote unquote, not hypothetically, but like, I don't know what the word is, but basically, like, when the red flag goes up, as a metaphor, that's when they need to back away and go on public property, because they cannot take that risk. Like, they are either like not from that country, or they have, children at home, or whatever it is that has them risk averse. That's when they need to step back, essentially. Police insist that you move. That's the next step up the ladder. Then you again assert the right to be there, assuming that the activist group does have the right to be there. This is the time to consider asking risk-averse people actually to leave. Police threaten citation. This is when it's time to consider probably leaving, depending on what the goal of the action is. This is mostly in like more passive forms. So like when it's like handing out leaflets or holding up signs, that kind of thing, something more like earthlings and things like that. It's more of a passive form of activism. in terms of civil disobedience. But if it's a more aggressive form, aggressive in the sense of like you're going to be there for longer, then you just state again that the activists have stated that they're not going to leave until their demand is met. And this is what they've said again. Next line up the ladder is police threatened citation. You've checked with the lawyer ahead of time. Everyone knows their rights. Everyone knows what the potential risk is, and assert that the activists have checked with a lawyer that they can be there, and that's only if that is true. And you can then let the police know why the activists are there. Considerations are leaving, coming back, or finding a new spot, staying, or mentioning that depending on if you are actually legally allowed to be there, like this is all in regards to that. Then if you are legally allowed to be there, then you could mention that the activists have mentioned that their lawyer may send a letter to the city, like in terms of suing them, that kind of thing might scare them a little bit into backing away. If that is in fact your right to be there, your right to protest, and that it's legal and on like public property. Record keeping, so much fun. So things that you want to keep records of is like communications, timestamp decisions, name and badge numbers. And it's advisable to keep all of this communication on record when whatever you have had with the police, because this may be useful to learn from, but also could support a court case. So some of the things you can do is like have someone filming. Depending on where you are, that might be illegal to actually film the police. So making sure that you have checked beforehand with your lawyer. In like, for example, the United States is totally fine. They may tell you to get that out of their face, or you're not allowed to film, or something like that. So it's important that that person who is filming knows their rights and can say, actually, yes, it's within my right to do this. You could have what is it called? Contemporaneous note taking. I think that's the way you say it. And it's basically like every time something happens and you're able to step away, you take notes on exactly what has happened. Sometimes that means you don't have the chance until after the entire demonstration, which is what I asked our police liaison for the oral action to do. So she wrote down everything that she could remember, put a date and time on it, and her name, everything like that. Took a picture of it, so now you have like, you know, that's kind of used as evidence in a sense. And the sooner that person can write down those contemporaneous notes, the better it'll hold up in court, at least in the United States, that's applicable. Post-action conversation with the police. I'll keep this brief. Basically, if you are doing that transparent kind of form of liaising, as well as like facilitating, then you can have that open conversation with the police afterwards. You can ask for another meeting, and you can say, well, that went jolly well, didn't it? Thank you for all of your hard work and support of our protest. You can say it's wonderful that we can build on this trusting relationship again. We were concerned that the protocols were not followed here and here. How can we assure that they are next time? What did you learn from the protest? Is there anything that you weren't happy with? This is one they'll give you, you know, a bunch of information of what they didn't like. But it also, in reading upon some of the notes that were taken by XR, there have been cases where this is when someone has brought forth a situation that occurred where like a little boy was on his bicycle and police that were on horseback like almost like ran him over or something like that, and they were really upset with that, the father was. And so then they brought that to the debrief, and of course the sergeant was like apologizing, and they even like, obviously, as you know, animal rights activists, this is not something that we would be happy with, but they invited the son to come and visit the horses as kind of like a gesture of kindness, to continue to have positive relationship. Look at Glenn's eyes rolling. But it is actually, like, in my opinion, a sign that they do want to try and keep positive relationships, which again can be leveraged. So we don't want to go see the horses in the locked up stables, but maybe that means that they're a little bit more lenient the next time there's a protest or something like that. Or they'll do a better job of ensuring the safety of our participants. And especially as an organizer, I hold that very, very, very high on my list of things, a list of priorities. Another thing you can ask them, I thought this is really funny because this is definitely like XR related, but they're like, when can we have our boat or a bathtub back? How about our truck? You can keep it lighthearted because you might not get it back, but you never know. They might actually give you your stuff back. So that if you have that transparent relationship, you can actually ask for your materials back. And this list is long. I'll keep it really short, but there's reasons why you might want to have a really good relationship with the police. And that's like, they have power, they have influence, they have lines of communication in any city with all these other authorities and public services that we don't have access to. And if they're positive about your group, then this attitude towards us will be shared with those other authorities as well. They can also set the tone for how others will interact with us. They can have the power to put pressure on the government, who they're already in contention with for reducing their resources. It can also help make the protest better, safer, and practically easier. But what do we want from the police ultimately in that kind of respect? In the end game, we do actually want the police to turn around to the government and say that they will not close us down any longer, that we're peaceful, that we're not criminals, and that we are right in our demands, that we are the government's problem, not the police's problem. And we saw this even in Otpor in Serbia, big revolution happened to overthrow the dictator, where police actually, they were told to block off the highways as all of these, what are they called? Like caravans, basically like cars following each other, came into the city ready to protest. They showed up to where they were told to show up, but they did not act. They stood down because they weren't going to fight against us any longer. So this is what we actually do want in the end, is for them to just say, we're just not gonna do this. There's just no point in us doing this. We don't believe that this is our job. And they are in support of what we're doing, and we want them to join us. That'd be cool too if they actually came in and joined us. Also, we put them in a dilemma situation where they either carry on arresting, filling up the cells, spending huge resources which they don't have, or they give up and shift the responsibility of our demands onto the government, and they put our demands to the government and say meeting them is the only way to clear the streets, and there's simply too many of us to arrest. And this is specific to like the XR kind of strategy of things. And if they respond with disproportionate force or become more heavy-handed, this actually only gathers like more support for our movement as people emphasize with the oppressed, not the oppressors. So we saw this happen a lot with like the ALC, when there were like shitloads of police in riot gear showing up to arrest people that were holding dead birds in their hands, and the imagery is just ridiculous. It just puts them in a dilemma, makes them just look crazy. So that's another reason. So yeah, things to remember: prioritize looking out for minority groups who may feel under greater threat from police. Be aware of the history of interaction a group or individual may have had with the police that may make them feel more threatened or hostile. Especially like if arrests start, warn these groups first. Listen, reflect, and learn constantly, making sure to keep your observation eyes on, observe the behavior of the police, observe what they're doing, listen to what words they're using, what is their demeanor, what's their mood like, are they aggressive or are they pretty passive and calm? Let's see. Also, like if a rogue unknown officer is questioning questioning you uncomfortably, you can always refer to the line of communication you already have, especially if it's with a more senior officer, or say no comment. So this has been the case with something that my mentor experienced, where they were in this giant Costco and people were demonstrating and they were told to leave. They were on their way leaving, and they had even the police chief come in and tell everyone to leave at this point. So then one of the activists was handing out leaflets and a random officer told her to stop. And so the police liaison came in and said, did your superior officer tell you that was needed, or did your superior officer tell you to do that? And he said no, and he said, well, then you should probably check with him first. So basically pressing for the chain of command, because that person was not supposed to do that. Like, it's the superior officer's word that goes in that scenario. He's in charge of that situation. So what ended up happening is that that police liaison then told the girl to continue to leaflet, and they left while she continued to leaflet. Let's see. Be aware that as a conduit for communication between the activists and police, you will, we already talked about that. Stay calm and repeat that you are only a line of communication and you don't have control over the activists or their decisions, but you can go and speak to them and ask if they can make a group decision based on the info that you've passed on. It is your
job.
Can
I make a comment, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because this is about the building relations with the police.
Yeah.
I just think that it's important for everyone that we realize that this is a strategy that XR uses, and also Animal Rebellion, and it's also a strategy that has received a lot of criticism from many social justice groups and also other animal rights activists. So I think it's also important for people to know, to really realize that it's not always a good thing to do, or at least do their own research on, do they want to do it, and find out what is the criticism before, everyone starts and build relationships with police.
Yeah,
so that's like two sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm presenting kind of array of different strategies because my presentation didn't include this at all, and I thought that was actually doing a major disservice to us in limiting our options, because we do have this option to use in our demonstrations, and that's up to the organizers. But as the police liaison, it's not our decision whether or not we use open or closed communication. That's up to the action designers. So this is basically this training basically equips you to be able to do either, to be able to be a police liaison in either scenario. So yeah, it's basically specifically up to the organizer to make that decision. But yes, thank you for adding that in, because it is a strategy, and it's dependent upon what strategy is used for that demonstration to then determine how you then respond. So yeah, let's see, just a few more here. What is your job? And this doesn't matter in what respect, what kind of liaising you're doing, but it is your job to keep the situation calm and respectful. And I will say that is, even if you're not developing relationships with the police before and after, it is still you still want to have respectful communication, because you are representing the group as a whole. You are the line of communication that the police have, and so you are giving them a perspective of what the group is. And if you're acting smart, or if you're acting sassy and things like that, it can give them the idea that maybe even the group is gonna be violent or something like that. They may even insinuate that. So just being respectful, communicating on behalf of the activists, and also always being aware that the activists may stray from the agreements and principles and values that have been put in place, and to be prepared to calmly intervene to remind those activists of that already agreed upon code of conduct that the organizers have set in place, and to seek support of those who are in a position to de-escalate if necessary. Let's see. And ensure that site coordinators are informed of police information, but don't make these coordinators or organizers known to the police. Avoid repeatedly going back and speaking to the same person. It can be hard, but even just have like a random couple conversations with other people before speaking to that organizer, or speak to a large group together, or refer to protesters as they, them, and not we. And just don't do it. Just don't lie to the police. It just could get you in so much trouble. Other things not to say is, so-and-so is in charge. We're here to rescue animals, or they're here to rescue animals. And that we don't care about the law, or they don't care about the law. Those are things to avoid. Any kind of things that are in line with that sort of perspective on things, because you know, even in civil disobedience, like that is kind of the whole like vision, is that it's the highest respect for the law is to disobey laws that are unjust and to willingly take the consequences. So in fact, there's the highest form of respect for the law. So now I'd love to open up to any questions you have. I know this was a really long one, but it's just a really important role, and there's a lot of kind of ins and outs to it, and some things can get people in a lot of trouble, and you're representing a whole group of people, so I want to make sure that I cover all my bases here. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you, let's see, I forgot it. If you also want to be part of the process on the strategy, or just the liaising?
Yeah, that's going to depend on the structure of your organizing team and your action design team. So for example, like in an action that is more covert, so let's say it's like a mass open rescue or something like that, then it is highly preferable that the police liaison knows as little as possible.
Okay.
That's to protect everyone, including that police liaison. So yeah, that they would not be involved in the planning for that. In regards to like XR and AR, or not AR, but Animal Rebellion. In Animal Rebellion, the police liaison does actually sit within the action design team. And so they know quite a bit about that, unless there are like side spicy things that have been designed external from the action design team.
So it's best to just go in blank and then just communicate with the two parties, and that's all.
Yeah, if it's a very covert action, then yes. But again, that police liaison should be properly briefed by the action marshal or organizer to know what the goals of the group are, the most important goals, and what the demands are, for example. And yeah, basically like what information does the police liaison need to know? Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but I'd like to thank you for your very well put together workshop.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really learned a lot from it, so thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Any more questions? Oh, we had something. Oh no, that was from earlier. Anything else?
Yeah, I have another one. What's like your biggest mistake, so to say, when you were liaising?
I think like the biggest mistake is like, especially in the beginning, I did have a tendency of being sassy to the police.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really hard. That was really hard in the beginning, just because like, I just wanted to not listen to what they had to say, and I was like, I know better than you do, and I know you're just trying to trick me and all this stuff. That's the main thing that I can think of. Other than that, it's been pretty vanilla, if you will. Just keeping it very Yeah, like, what is this little neck thing you're doing? But yeah, it's been pretty vanilla and just like pretty basic stuff across the board, because now I do know my rights and I know how serious it is to just like, you know, remove yourself from the group and just say, I'm just the talking piece, and not give away too much information. So anything else? Any clarification questions or anything like that? Cool. Well, appreciate all of your help and all of your attentiveness, and I'm so excited there's so many people who are now trained to be police liaisons. So yeah, and lots of you, I see a lot of faces that are at a lot of actions, so now we're very equipped with fully trained police liaisons. How exciting.
Yeah, I also want to thank everyone to join the first workshop of the Animal Resistance University.